Section 2 of the Conjure Woman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James K. White. Section 2 of the Conjure Woman by Charles Waddell Chesnutt. Po Sandy. On the northeast corner of my vineyard, in central North Carolina, and fronting on the Lumberton Plank Road, there stood a small frame house, of the simplest construction. It was built of pine lumber, and contained but one room, to which one window gave light, and one door admission. Its weather-beaten sides revealed a virgin innocence of paint. Against one end of the house, and occupying half its width, there stood a huge brick chimney. The crumbling mortar had left large cracks between the bricks. The bricks themselves had begun to scale off in large flakes, leaving the chimney sprinkled with unsightly blotches. These evidences of decay were but partially concealed by a creeping vine, which extended its slender branches hither and thither in an ambitious but futile attempt to cover the whole chimney. The wooden shutter, which had once protected the unglazed window, had fallen from its hinges, and lay rotting in the rank grass and jimson weeds beneath. This building, I learned when I bought the place, had been used as a schoolhouse for several years prior to the breaking out of the war, since which time it had remained unoccupied, save when some stray cow or vagrant hog had sought shelter within its walls from the chill rains and nipping winds of winter. One day my wife requested me to build her a new kitchen. The house, erected by us when we first came to live upon the vineyard, contained a very conveniently arranged kitchen, but for some occult reason my wife wanted a kitchen in the back yard, apart from the dwelling house, after the usual Southern fashion. Of course I had to build it. To save expense, I decided to tear down the old schoolhouse, and use the lumber, which was in a good state of preservation, in the construction of the new kitchen. Before demolishing the old house, however, I made an estimate of the amount of material contained in it, and found that I would have to buy several hundred feet of lumber additional, in order to build the new kitchen according to my wife's plan. One morning old Julius McAdoo, our colored coachman, harnessed the gray mare to the rockaway, and drove my wife and me over to the sawmill from which I meant to order the new lumber. We drove down the long lane which led from our house to the plank road. Following the plank road for about a mile, we turned into a road running through the forest and across the swamp to the sawmill beyond. Our carriage jolted over the half-rotted corduroy road which traversed the swamp, and then climbed the long hill leading to the sawmill. When we reached the mill, the foreman had gone over to a neighboring farmhouse, probably to smoke or gossip, and we were compelled to await his return before we could transact our business. We remained seated in the carriage, a few rods from the mill, and watched the leisurely movements of the mill hands. We had not waited long before a huge pine log was placed in position. The machinery of the mill was set in motion, and the circular saw began to eat its way through the log, with a loud whir, which resounded throughout the vicinity of the mill. The sound rose and fell in a sort of rhythmic cadence, which, heard from where we sat, was not unpleasing, and not loud enough to prevent conversation. When the saw started on its second journey through the log, Julius observed in a lugubrious tone, and with a perceptible shudder, but dat just do cuddle my blood." "What's the matter, Uncle Julius?" inquired my wife, who is of a very sympathetic turn of mind. "Does the noise affect your nerves?" "No, Miss Annie," replied the old man with emotion, "I ain' nervous, but dat saw, a cuttin' and grindin' th'ough dat stick er timber, and moanin' and groanin' and sweekin', ca'es my 'memb'ance back to ole times, and 'minds me er po' Sandy." The pathetic intonation with which he lengthened out the "Po' Sandy" touched a responsive chord in our own hearts. "And who was poor Sandy?" asked my wife, who takes a deep interest in the stories of plantation life which she hears from the lips of the older colored people. Some of these stories are quaintly humorous, others wildly extravagant, revealing the oriental cast of the negro's imagination, while others, poured freely into the sympathetic ear of a northern bred woman, disclose many a tragic incident of the darker side of slavery. "Sandy," said Julius, replying to my wife's question, "was a nigger what used to belong to ole Mars Marrabo McSwain. Mars Marrabo's place was on the other side of the swamp, right next to yo' place. Sandy was a monstrous good nigger, and could do so many things there about the plantation, and allers tend to his work so well, that when Mars Marrabo's chilluns growed up and married off, dey all of 'em wanted dey daddy fer to gin 'em Sandy for a weddin' present. But Mars Marrabo knowed the rest wouldn't be satisfied if he gin Sandy to e'er one of 'em. So when dey was all done married, he fix' it by 'lowin' one of his chilluns to take Sandy fer a month er so, en den anudder fer a month er so, en so on dat a way 'tel dey had all had 'em de same lenk' er time. En den dey would all take 'em roun' ag'in, 'ceptin' oncet in a w'ile w'en Mars Marrabo would len' 'em to some er his udder kinfolks roun' de country, w'en dey wuz short er han's. 'Til bimeby it got so Sandy didn' hardly know whar he wuz gwine ter stay fum one week's een' ter de other. One time, w'en Sandy wuz lent out ez usual, a speculator come along wid a lot er niggers, en Mars Marrabo swap' Sandy's wife off fer a new 'oman. W'en Sandy come back, Mars Marrabo gin 'im $1, en 'lowed he wuz monst'us sorry fer de break up er de family, but de speculator had gin 'im big boot, en times wuz hard en money skace, en so he wuz bleedst ter make a trade. Sandy tuk on some 'bout losin' his wife, but he soon seed dey wa'n't no use cryin' ober spilt molasses, en bein' ez he lacked de looks er de new 'oman, he tuk up wid her atter she be'n on de plantation a month er so. Sandy en his new wife got on mighty well tergedder, en de niggers all 'mence' ter talk about how lovin' dey wuz. W'en Tenny wuz tuk sick oncet, Sandy useter set up all night wid her, en den go ter work in de mawnin des lack he had his reg'lar sleep, en Tenny would 'a' done anythin' in de worl' fer her Sandy. Sandy en Tenny hadn' be'n livin' tergedder fer mo' d'n 2 months befo' Mars Marrabo's ole uncle, w'at lived down in Robeson County, sent up ter fin' out ef Mars Marrabo couldn't len' him or hire him a good han' fer a month er so. Sandy's marster wuz one er dese yer easy goin' folks w'at wanter please eve'ybody, en he says yes, he could len' him Sandy. En Mars Marrabo tole Sandy fer ter git ready ter go down ter Robeson nex' day fer ter stay a month er so. It wuz monst'us hard on Sandy fer ter take him away fum Tenny. It wuz so fur down ter Robeson dat he didn' have no chance er comin' back ter see her 'tel de time wuz up. He wouldn't 'a' min' comin' 10 or 15 mile at night ter see Tenny, but Mars Marrabo's uncle's plantation wuz mo' d'n 40 mile off. Sandy wuz mighty sad en cas' down atter w'at Mars Marrabo tole him, en he says ter Tenny, sezee, 'I'm gittin' monst'us tired er dish yer gwine roun' so much. Here I is lent ter Mars Jeems dis month, en I got ter do so en so, en ter Mars Archie de nex' month, en I got ter do so en so, den I got ter go ter Miss Jenny's. En it's Sandy dis en Sandy dat, en Sandy yer en Sandy dere, 'tel it 'pears ter me I ain' got no home, ner no marster, ner no mistress, ner no nuffin. I can't even keep a wife. My other ole 'oman was sole away widout my gittin' a chance fer ter tell her good bye, en now I got ter go off en leave you, Tenny, en I don' know whether I'm eber gwine ter see you ag'in, en no I wish I wuz a tree, er a stump, or a rock, er sump'n w'at could stay on de plantation fer a w'ile." Atter Sandy got th'oo talkin', Tenny didn' say na'er a word, but des sat dere by de fire studyin' en studyin'. Bimeby she up en says, "Sandy, is I eber tole you I wuz a conjure woman?" Co'se Sandy hadn' neber dreamt er nuffin like dat, en he made a great 'miration w'en he hear w'at Tenny say. Bimeby Tenny went on. I ain't goofed nobody, ner done no conjure work fer 15 year er more, en w'en I got religion I made up my mind I wouldn't work no more goofer. But dey is some things I don't believe is no sin fer to do. En ef you don't wanter be sent roun' fum pillar to pos', en ef you don't wanter go down to Robeson, I kin fix things so you won't hafter. Ef you'll jes say de word, I kin turn you to whatever you wanter be, en you kin stay right whar you wanter, ez long ez you min' ter.' Sandy say he don't care. He's willin' fer to do anything fer to stay close to Tenie. Den Tenie ax' him ef he don't wanter be turnt into a rabbit. Sandy say, 'Nah, de dogs mought git atter me.' 'Shall I turn you to a wolf?' says Tenie. 'Nah, eve'ybody's scared er a wolf, en I don't want nobody to be scared er me.' 'Shall I turn you to a mockin' bird?' 'Nah, a hawk mought ketch me. I wanter be turnt inter sump'n w'at'll stay in one place.' 'I kin turn you to a tree,' says Tenie. 'You won't hab no mouf ner years, but I kin turn you back oncet in a w'ile, so you kin git sump'n ter eat, en hear w'at's gwine on.' Well, Sandy say dat'll do, en so Tenie tuk him down by de edge er de swamp, not fur fum de quarters, en turnt him into a big pine tree, en sot him out 'mongs' some other trees. En de nex' mornin', ez some er de fiel' han's wuz gwine 'long dere, dey seed a tree w'at dey didn' 'member er habbin' seed befo'. It wuz monst'us queer, en dey wuz bleedzd ter 'low dat dey hadn' 'membered right, er else one er de saplings had be'n growin' monst'us fas'. W'en Mars Marrabo 'skivered dat Sandy wuz gone, he 'lowed Sandy had run away. He got de dogs out, but de las' place dey could track Sandy ter wuz de foot er dat pine tree. En dere de dogs stood en barked en bayed en pawed at de tree en tried ter climb up on it. En w'en dey wuz took roun' th'ough de swamp ter look fer de scent, dey broke loose en made fer dat tree ag'in. It wuz de beatenis' thing de w'ite folks eber hearn of, en Mars Marrabo 'lowed dat Sandy must 'a' climb up on de tree en jump off on a mule er sump'n, en reared fur ernuff fer ter spoil de scent. Mars Marrabo wanted ter 'cuse some er de other niggers er helpin' Sandy off, but dey all 'nied it ter de las', en eve'ybody knowed Tenie sot too much sto' by Sandy fer ter help 'im run away whar she couldn't neber see 'im no mo'. W'en Sandy had be'n gone long ernuff fer folks ter think he done got clean away, Tenie useter go down ter de woods at night en turn 'im back, en den dey'd slip up ter de cabin en set by de fire en talk. But dey had ter be monst'us careful, er else somebody would 'a' seed 'em, en dat would 'a' spoilt de whole thing. So Tenie alluz turned Sandy back in de mornin' early, befo' anybody wuz a stirrin'. But Sandy didn't git along widout his trials en tribbilations. One day a woodpecker come along en 'mence' ter peck at de tree, en de nex' time Sandy wuz turns back he had a little roun' hole in his arm, des lack a sharp stick be'n stuck in it. Atter dat, Tenie sot a sparrowhawk fer ter watch de tree, en w'en de woodpecker come along nex' mornin' fer ter finish his nes', he got gobble' up mos' 'fo' he stuck his bill in de bark. 'Nudder time Mars Marrabo sent a nigger out in de woods fer ter chop turpentine boxes. De man chop a box in dish yer tree en hack de bark up 2 or 3 feet fer ter let de turpentine run. De nex' time Sandy wuz turnt back, he had a big scar on his lef' leg, des lack it be'n skunt, en it tuk Tenie nigh 'bout all night fer ter fix a mixtry ter cure it up. Atter dat, Tenie sot a ha'ntet fer ter watch de tree, en w'en de nigger come back ag'in fer ter cut anudder box on de other side er de tree, de ha'ntet stung 'im so hard dat de axe slip en cut his foot nigh 'bout off. W'en Tenie see so many things happenin' to de tree, she 'cluded she had ter turn Sandy ter sump'n else, en atter studyin' de matter ober, en talkin' wid Sandy one evenin', she made up her min' fer ter fix up a goopher mixtry w'at would turn herse'f en Sandy ter foxes, er sump'n, so dey could run away en go somewheres whar dey could be free en lib like w'ite folks. But dey ain' no tellin' w'at's gwine happen in dis worl'. Tenie had got de night sot fer her en Sandy ter run away, w'en dat ve'y day one er Mars Marrabo's sons rid up ter de big house in his buggy, en say his wife wuz monst'us sick, and he want his mammy to lend him a woman for to nuss his wife. Tenny's mistress say send Tenny, she was a good nuss. Young Mars was in a terrible hurry for to get back home. Tenny was washing at the big house that day, and the mistress say she should go right along with her young massa. Tenny tried to make some excuse for to get away and hide till night, when she would have everything fixed up for her and Sandy. She say she want to go to her cabin for to get her bonnet. Her mistress say it don't matter about the bonnet. Her head hanker was good enough. Then Tenny say she want to get her best frock. Her mistress say no, she don't need no more frock, and when that one got dirty, she could get a clean one where she was going. So Tenny had to get in the buggy and go along with young Mars Duncan to his plantation, which was mo' d'n 20 mile away, and they wasn't no chance of her seeing Sandy no mo' till she come back home. The po' gal felt monstrous bad 'bout the way things was going on, and she knowed Sandy must be a wondering why she didn't come turning back no mo'. Whiles Tenny was away nussin' young Mars Duncan's wife, Mars Marrabo took a notion fer to build him a new kitchen, and bein' as he had lots of timber on his place, he begun to look roun' for a tree to have the lumber sawed out'n. And I don't know how it come to be so, but it happened fer to hit on the very tree w'at Sandy was turns into. Tenny was gone, and they wa'n't nobody ner nuffin fer to watch the tree. The two men w'at cut the tree down say they never had such a time with a tree befo'. They axes would glance off, and didn't 'pear to make no progress through the wood. And of all the creakin' and shakin' and wobblin' you eber see, that tree done it when it commenced to fall. It was the beatin'est thing. When they got the tree all trim up, they chain it up to a timber wagon, and start for the sawmill. But they had a hard time getting a log there. First they got stuck in the mud when they was going 'cross the swamp, and it was 2 or 3 hours before they could get it out. When they start on again, the chain kep' a comin' loose, and they had to keep a stoppin' and a stoppin' fer to hitch the log up again. When they commenced to climb the hill to the sawmill, the log broke loose and rolled down the hill in amongst the trees, and it took nigh 'bout half a day mo' to get it hauled up to the sawmill. The next mornin', after the day the tree was hauled to the sawmill, Tenny come home. When she got back to her cabin, the first thing she done was to run down to the woods and see how Sandy was getting on. When she seed the stump standing there, with the sap running out'n it, and the limbs layin' scattered round, she nigh about went out'n her mind. She run to her cabin and got a gopher mixtry, and then followed the track of the timber wagon to the sawmill. She knowed Sandy couldn't live mo' d'n a minute or so if she turns him back, for he was all chop' up, so he'd 'a' been bleedst to die. But she wanted to turn him back long enough fer to 'splain to him that she hadn't went off a purpose, and lef' him to be chopped down and sawed up. She didn't want Sandy to die with no hard feelin's to'ds her. The hands at the sawmill had jest got the big log on the carriage, and was startin' up the saw when they seed a woman runnin' up the hill, all out of breath, cryin' and goin' on jest like she was plumb 'stracted. It was Tenny. She come right into the mill, and throwed herself on the log, right in front of the saw, a hollerin' and cryin' to her Sandy to fergive her, and not to think hard of her, for it wa'n't no fault of her'n. Den Tenny 'membered the tree didn't have no years, and she was gettin' ready fer to work her gopher mixtry so as to turn Sandy back, when the mill hands cotch holt of her and tied her arms with a rope, and fastened her to one of the posts in the sawmill. And then they started to saw up again, and cut the log up into boards and scantlings right before her eyes. But it was mighty hard work, for of all the sweekin' and moanin' and groanin', that log done it whiles the saw was a cuttin' through it. The saw was one of these 'ere old-timey up and down saws, and it took longer them days to saw a log 'en it do now. They greased the saw, but that didn't stop the fuss. It kep' right on, till finally they got the log all sawed up. When the oberseer w'at run the sawmill come from breakfast, the hands up and tell him 'bout the crazy woman, as they s'posed she was, w'at had come runnin' in the sawmill, a hollerin' and goin' on, and tried to throw herself before the saw. and the overseer sent 2 or 3 of the hands fer to take Tenny back to her master's plantation. Tenny 'peared to be out'n her mind fer a long time, and her marster had to lock her up in the smoke house till she got over her spells. Mars Marrabo was monst'us mad, and it would 'a' made yo' flesh crawl fer to hear him cuss, 'cause he say the speculator w'at he got Tenny from had fooled him by wuckin' a crazy woman off on him. W'iles Tenny was lock' up in the smoke house, Mars Marrabo tuk and hauled the lumber from the sawmill and put up his new kitchen. When Tenny got quiet down, so she could be 'lowed to go roun' the plantation, she up and tole her marster all about Sandy and the pine tree, and when Mars Marrabo hearn it, he 'lowed she was the wust 'stracted nigger he eber hearn of. He didn't know w'at to do wid Tenny. Fus' he thought he'd put her in the po'house, but finally, seein' as she didn't do no harm to nobody ner nuffin, but des went aroun' moanin' and groanin' and shakin' her head, he 'cluded to let her stay on the plantation and nuss the little nigger chilluns when dey mammies was to wuk in the cotton fiel'. The new kitchen Mars Marrabo built wa'n't much use, fer it hadn't be'n put up long befo' the niggers 'mence' to notice queer things about it. Dey could hear somethin' moanin' and groanin' 'bout in the kitchen in the night time, and w'en the win' would blow, dey could hear somethin' a hollerin' and sweekin' lack it was in great pain and sufferin'. And it got so atter a while dat it was all Mars Marrabo's wife could do to git a woman to stay in the kitchen in the daytime long enough to do the cookin'. And dey wa'n't na'er nigger on the plantation w'at wouldn't rudder take 40 den to go 'bout dat kitchen after dark. Dat is, 'ceptin' Tenny. She didn't 'pear to mind the ha'nts. She used to slip roun' at night and set on the kitchen steps and lean up 'g'inst the do' jamb and run on to herse'f wid some kind er foolishness w'at nobody couldn't make out, fer Mars Marrabo had th'eatened to sen' her off'n the plantation ef she say anythin' to any er the other niggers 'bout the pine tree. But somehow er udder the niggers foun' out all about it, en dey all knowed the kitchen was ha'nted by Sandy's sperrit. En bimeby it got so Mars Marrabo's wife herse'f was scared to go out in the yard after dark. W'en it come to dat, Mars Marrabo tuk and tore the kitchen down, and used the lumber fer to build dat ole schoolhouse w'at you war talkin' 'bout pullin' down. The schoolhouse was in use 'ceptin' in the daytime, and on dark nights folks gwine 'long the road would hear queer sounds and see queer things. Po' ole Tenny used to go down there at night and wander roun' the schoolhouse, and the niggers all 'lowed she went fer to talk wid Sandy's sperrit. En one winter mornin', w'en one er the boys went to school early fer to start the fire, what should he find but po' ole Tenny layin' on the flo', stiff en cole en dead. Dey didn't 'pear to be nuffin partic'lar de matter wid her. She had des grieve' herse'f to death fer her Sandy. Mars Marrabo didn't shed no tears. He thought Tenny was crazy, en dey wa'n't no tellin' w'at she might do nex', en dey ain' much room in dis worl' fer crazy w'ite folks, let alone a crazy nigger. It wa'n't long atter dat befo' Mars Marrabo sol' a piece er his trac' of lan' to Mars Dugal' McAdoo, my ole marster, en dat's how the ole schoolhouse happen' to be on yo' place. W'en the wah broke out, the school stop', en the ole schoolhouse be'n standin' empty ever sence, dat is, 'cep'n fer the ha'nts, en folks says dat the ole schoolhouse, er any yuther house w'at got any er dat lumber in it w'at was sawed out'n de tree w'at Sandy was turnt inter, is gwine to be ha'nted till the las' piece er plank is rotted en crumble inter dus'." Annie had listened to this gruesome narrative with strained attention. What a system it was, she exclaimed, when Julius had finished, under which such things were possible. "What things?" I asked in amazement. "Are you seriously considering the possibility of a man's being turned into a tree?" "Oh, no," she replied quickly, "not that." And then she murmured absently, and with a dim look in her fine eyes, "Poor Tenny." We ordered the lumber and returned home. That night, after we had gone to bed, and my wife had to all appearances been sound asleep for half an hour, she startled me out of an incipient doze by exclaiming suddenly, "John, I don't believe I want my new kitchen built out of the lumber in that old schoolhouse." "You wouldn't for a moment allow yourself," I replied with some asperity, "to be influenced by that absurdly impossible yarn which Julius was spinning to day." "I know the story is absurd," she replied dreamily, "and I am not so silly as to believe it. But I don't think I should ever be able to take any pleasure in that kitchen if it were built out of that lumber. Besides, I think the kitchen would look better and last longer if the lumber were all new." Of course she had her way. I bought the new lumber, though not without grumbling. A week or two later I was called away from home on business. On my return, after an absence of several days, my wife remarked to me: "John, there has been a split in the Sandy Run Colored Baptist Church on the temperance question. About half the members have come out from the main body, and set up for themselves. Uncle Julius is one of the seceders, and he came to me yesterday and asked if they might not hold their meetings in the old schoolhouse for the present." "I hope you didn't let the old rascal have it," I returned with some warmth. I had just received a bill for the new lumber I had bought. "Well," she replied, "I couldn't refuse him the use of the house for so good a purpose." "And I'll venture to say," I continued, "that you subscribed something toward the support of the new church?" She did not attempt to deny it. "What are they going to do about the ghost?" I asked, somewhat curious to know how Julius would get around this obstacle. "Oh," replied Annie, "Uncle Julius says that ghosts never disturb religious worship, but that if Sandy's spirit should happen to stray into meeting by mistake, no doubt the preaching would do it good." End of Post Sandy. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista.